G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. It is draft day for you. I'm recording this the day before. I thought I would do a little bit of a check-in right as the day of the draft. I've noticed this has probably been the month I've been the least active on the True Eagle channel because I've been pretty preoccupied with True Footy, trying to do lots of work in preparation for this draft. So I thought I'd do a final check-in with you and discuss how we're all thinking and feeling and how this day might play out. Once again, I'll be a little bit preoccupied with True Footy today, so I'm going to be live for both days of the draft for the 3 hours each day, whatever it's going to be. I'm going to do an end of day one reaction and analysis, and I'm going to do a day two mock in between the 2 days. So it might be a little bit before I get back to this channel to review it, but you can find all of my thoughts as it's happening on that channel. So I thought we'd just take stock of where we're at and how we hope this day may play out. Draft day for me has always historically been like Christmas Day for me. It has been the one day that I've just been counting down for always, which is interesting because there's been a lot of drafts where we haven't had good picks, but for some reason there's just something beautiful about draft day. I have a draft day tradition, which I've just remembered that I'm going to have to do tonight, and that's where I watch draft day with Kevin Costner in it. Good film. However, having said all that, this might be the first draft in 15 years where it snuck up on me. Like I didn't know it was coming up. Normally I'm like, oh God, 21 days to the draft or 15 days to the draft. And now, for the first time ever, it got to like a few days before the draft and I was like, oh my God, it's right around the corner. And I think that is a little bit of a reflection of just a little bit of resignation I have specifically as an Eagles fan towards this draft. And it's something I've seen mirrored in the online community as well. I don't know how many Eagles fans are as excited about this draft as perhaps they could be. And for me, I'm trying to personally sort of audit exactly what psychologically is going on in my head. Why do I not really care about this draft as much as I should? And some of that is personal. Like I'm about to move back to Perth in about 2 weeks. So I've sort of been planning for the future after that. I turned 31 on Friday. It's going to be a huge weekend. And, I can't help but look a little bit past this draft. So I wondered if it's just that, but then I do see it mirrored in what people are saying out there. And I do suspect, maybe it comes down to this trade that we traded out of the top three of this year's draft, and perhaps there's a belief that we don't hold any good picks. And then further to that, if you look specifically at like what mock drafts are saying and who's likely to be available to our picks, there seems to be a lack of candidates for this pick that really inspire confidence. It's not that they're not good players, but the players that are good and that are linked to us are just like positionally not quite right. Whereas we're hoping after another miserable season, we were kind of hoping to find the next Elijah Hewitt, or maybe not the Harley Reid. I think he's a bit of a 1 in a million, to be honest, but someone of that ilk who is at least like a midfielder that we can sort of bank on to becoming a big part of our future. So there seems to be a bit of a caveat on all the players that we've discussed as being candidates for our pick. And I do find myself not knowing how today is going to go. Usually I'll offer some predictions and I will, have a crack, but I just don't have a good feel on West Coast pick. And I do think that is by design. I think they're pretty good at hiding it. The Campbell Chesser pick, that one was kind of telegraphed like 24 hours out before the draft. That was a bit of a surprise, but, I think back to like Daniel Venables in 2016 or Jared Brander in 2017, like those ones were completely out of the blue. So I'm prepared to be surprised today. And perhaps it is a good thing as an Eagles fan to go in with no expectations. Like I don't feel excited about, who we're going to pick up. It feels like all the guys I like are just above we're going to pick. But I do think that in itself is probably a psychological thing. I think for every draft I've always felt like, other than 2023, the players we really want are just out of our reach. I think there's a psychological thing. If we were picking at pick 8 in this year's draft, we'd be thinking, oh God, I wish we could get Sid Draper or Jagger Smith or whatever. So perhaps you're always going to feel like that regardless of where that pick is. But I think this is still a really important draft for us. So it's important not to overlook it as not being important. It's just that we won't necessarily have access to that top group of midfielders, which we've covered. But it doesn't mean we're not going to pick a good player who's really important to us. And to be honest, like the importance of nailing your late picks is just as important as nailing your top ones. We might not find one of our top 5 players of our future premiership team in this year's draft, but it's still really important to nail those later picks and find that ancillary sort of talent to really round out your team, because we still have a lot of adding to do in terms of our list build. I've done an analysis on Hawthorn and what makes up their team and shit. Like there's like 8 players they traded in cheaply, and then there's a whole heap of players taken after pick 40 in that team, and a distinct lack of high draft picks. Even Will Day, who's probably their best young midfielder, was pick 11, I reckon. And Jai Newcomb was a mid-season draftee. Nick Watson was pick 5, but that's the one example. So following on from that logic, I'm just saying that it's really important. I'm really intrigued to see what we do later in this year's draft. So we do currently just hold 12, 26, 73, and then, a few picks after that. But I don't think that will be the way it goes today. And that's another reason why this is so hard to predict, because I suspect we're going to try and trade in with Hawthorn's future first. We've heard so many mixed opinions about that. There's people that have ruled it out, and then Toomey said, West Coast are looking to trade the Hawthorn pick, but not their own first. So I'm prepared to be surprised today, and I'm just hoping that I'm happy with the outcome. But that's another thing, right? Like, there's been so many drafts where I have had my heart set on a player, and we've taken someone else, and the player we've taken has ended up way better than the player I wanted. And then there's been a few years where I've been pleasantly surprised to see who we've taken. The classic one for me was Elijah Hewitt. I think there was a Toomey mock the day of the 2022 draft or the day before where it had Hewitt getting to us at 21. And yet when West Coast called out pick 14 Elijah Hewitt, I cheered. And that was just an unconscious reaction. So I'm wondering who those players will be for us this year. Which player would I cheer if we picked him? It's a tough one because I don't really want to pick favourites, and I don't want to be flat with who we're going to pick. Well, let's just do a little mapping out of how today might go. First of all, let's talk about what we need and what we don't need. And perhaps, when you've got a list as deficient as ours, that is still building, the list of what we don't need is much shorter than the list of what we do need. However, I've probably placed an emphasis on running power, particularly in our midfield, guys who can run from contest to contest. We have guys who can win the footy, and then post-clearance, we're terrible. Forward line potency. I put this in here because I feel like we have a lot of small forwards, and that is true. That is true. But not many of them are proven reliable goal kickers who hit the scoreboard consistently. So I will put that in there as something we do still need, as opposed to those small forwards who play a little bit higher and don't kick goals. Someone like a Noah Long, who I think is a good player, but he's not necessarily going to kick 40 goals in a season, is he? So forward line potency is still something we need. Midfield depth, I don't know whether or not we're going to draft a midfielder with our first pick. It seems like the only player I would categorise as a true midfielder at this point is Xavier Lindsay. Perhaps you could say the same thing about Taj Houghton, but it was such a small sample size with Taj, and I do think the upside there is really high. But he did an ACL really before he started playing. I think he played like a month as a proper midfielder, and he looked fantastic. So outside of those two, maybe midfield depth with some of our later picks. I've said it before and I'll say it again, a tall defender at some point of the draft. I don't think it needs to be, our first or second pick. I think, perhaps we trade back into the 30s or 40s. There's a few good options there like Clancy Dennis or Tom Bell or Charlie Nichols if we see him as a defensive half player. I mean, those are some options. But I would like to see us end the draft on day 2 with at least one 18-year-old key defensive prospect. And a running defender is definitely on the list. What do we not need in this year's draft? Well, I would say one-dimensional inside midfielders. Players who are there for the clearance and not great post-clearance. That is something we just don't need. Probably don't need any third tall forwards. I think we're pretty well stocked in this area. I mean, you got Ryan Marrick, Jack Hutchinson could probably play that role. He's like 191 centimetres. I think the Eagles site listed him as a key forward. I don't know what player he'll evolve into. Jake Waterman, you could say Jack Williams and Archer Reed. They're not really third talls, they're ruck forwards. But again, this is just not something we need to add to. Key forwards in general, I just don't know. I really don't think so. An 18-year-old ruck, early at least. I mean, if we draft one late, sure, whatever. But, with limited picks at this year's draft, we're probably going to take 4 or 5. Probably wouldn't want to ruck at least in the first 2. It just seems like a bad investment at this current point in time. And then small forwards who don't kick goals. So the good thing is there's a lot of small forwards in this year's draft. Well, you could say that's a good thing or not, because we don't really need one, and yet we're linked to Joe Berry and perhaps Ollie Hannaford as well. The whole Ollie Hannaford one, I've seen one link to us. I think this just comes out of the reality that we're probably going to like our Vic Country boys, and there's a few good Vic Country small forwards, and they're all rated around the range of our pick. The good thing about Berry and Hannaford is that they are actually potent in front of goal, so I'll just say that. The talls versus smalls thing, this conversation here is interesting because there has been a lot of noise about us going tall today and a big link to Jobe Shanahan. Luke Traynor makes sense at our second pick. I'd be stoked if we get Luke Traynor at our second pick. I don't think that's likely at this point. But Jobe Shanahan with our first pick, The only way that that would be okay with me is if we've traded back into the first round and taken a smaller player as well. But I am torn because Jobe Shanahan, I think, could be a really good player. Like, what if he's the next McGovern? What if we draft him, turn him into a key defender, and becomes an absolute all-star? That would be hard to argue with after the fact, but obviously we don't know how he's going to turn out. So Jobe Shanahan with our first pick, and we don't take another small player inside the top 30, like that would be an odd result. However, like there has been continual links to us. So Cal Toomey said we're linked to Shanahan. I think Fox Sports said the same thing. And Mitch Woodcock in the West Australian also did a mock draft. Now, I don't know what Mitch Woodcock knows. It seems unlikely to me that he's well connected. Perhaps he's going what others have said, but Mitch Woodcock had us taking Shanahan with our first pick. I have a little theory that perhaps we do like him, but I do suspect we might be trying to spook Richmond into taking him at 14. It's just a theory. Like, I don't know for sure that clubs do that. Like, they put out information. It makes perfect sense, but I obviously don't know it to be true. But it would make a lot of sense if we were just trying to get them to take, you know, Shanahan or Murphy Reid. I do suspect we're not going to take Murphy Reid today. I realize the more I say that, the more I open myself up to be laughed at when we don't. And I will back him in if we take him. I will. I won't complain too much. But there has just been a lot of noise about the go-home factor. So, you know, if Murphy Reid gets taken before our first pick, if Jobe Shanahan gets taken before our first pick, in theory, that increases the odds of someone that we're hoping for to slide down. And I think those three would be Travalia, Beau Allen, Xavier Lindsay. Beau Allen probably seems unlikely. Travalia similarly doesn't seem very likely at this point. Xavier Lindsay is a chance, even though like a lot of the mocks have him gone before our first pick. So I do think Taj Hutton is a very viable contender here. Again, he's not a player like I've focused on here a lot. I think I've read, you know, previously that he might be a flight risk too. However, that has only come from like big footy. So I'll just put that out there that it's not the talk about him being homesick or a flight risk is not as strong as someone like a Murphy Reid. And I will defer to West Coast judgment if they take him. So we did also hear that we might be looking at Ollie Houghton as a train-on. For those unaware, his older brother, Ollie, just got delisted by St Kilda, small forward from the 2022 draft, I want to say, who I do remember liking that year, actually. But if that is true, if we are potentially going to sign him as a train-on, I presume that's got to be linked to Taj Houghton potentially being taken with our first pick in this year's draft. So I suppose in the way of predictions, you know, I think the most likely scenario here is we do draft Taj Houghton. That'll be my draft day prediction. And I think I would be pretty comfortable with that, particularly if we get Ollie over as well. There is a lot of risk over it though. So the cost benefit, or the risk / benefit, is that Taj has done an ACL and we're probably not going to see him until mid-year. And even then, he'll probably start in the waffle for a little while and probably struggle in a bad waffle team. So that's not very alluring. However, you just watch this kid play and he has got a bag of tricks. He's got serious game and he's got the class that we so desperately lack. So, you know, long-term play, Taj Houghton being at West Coast, I think suits us perfectly. Am I comfortable with the risk? Perhaps I am because of the other contenders for this pick. So, I mean, Jobe Shanahan, Joe Berry, small forward. You know, I'm not going to lie. If Hannaford is called out at our first pick, which I'm not really predicting, I've said that in mocks, but I think he might be the player that makes me cheer. Call me crazy, but with the lack of other like clear options here, like I don't want us to take Hannaford over Xavier Lindsay. But if we pull a big surprise and say selection 15 West Coast Ollie Hannaford, I'm probably going to cheer because I think this kid's a gun. Anyway, I've said my bit on him. I've also said that plenty of times I've liked a player and they've gone on to be terrible. So drafting is an inexact science. Like clubs obviously have more info than us. And, you know, not only is it hard to select players when you're an actual recruiter with all that access, but when you're a fan, obviously you have way less to go off. You kind of just go on a vibe. But I tell you what, I think the kid's got a bag of tricks, and I do think he would suit what McWalter is saying about the way we want to play our footy. And I would just be stoked if we've done this big smoke screen and everyone thinks we're going to go a certain way and we go, boom, Ollie Hannaford. Because I don't think talent-wise is that much of a gap personally. I would prefer him to Joe Berry. And Taj Houghton is probably more talented and has more upside. Comes with the ACL caveat. Jobe Shanahan, again, probably more talented. Key forward. So yeah, just to summarise what else has been said about the way we're going to go today, Toomey has us taking Murphy Reid and Bowman. I don't agree with the Murphy Reid call. I don't know anything about Bowman, to be honest. Seems like a clever forward and again, just not really a position of need. Fox has us taking Taj Houghton and I will agree with that. That is probably my current prediction based on everything we know right now. I'm going to say Taj Houghton gets to West Coast. Mitch Woodcock has just taken Jobe Shanahan. Again, I suspect this might be a smokescreen. I'd be surprised if we take Jobe Shanahan. But at the same time, He looks very good. So if we go Taj Houghton, our second pick is so hard to predict. And I feel like making predictions of this is just also going to make me look silly, because I do think this is a draft where the guys that we think might get taken in the early 30s might go in the 60s, and you might start hearing names that you've barely heard at 25. Like, I think it will be that even. So I feel silly, making calls. But, Hamish Davis, he could go at our second pick. He could go at pick 65. We got Harry Oliver. Both Fox and Toomey had him going before our second selection. So maybe they're right about that. Maybe he goes to one of those clubs before us. There's been a link to Richmond and GWS. But, he would suit us as a good quality small defender and an accountable one as well. So not one of those players that just worries about what he's doing with the ball in hand. He's good on opposition forwards as well. Is it a massive need? I mean, we kind of already have Brady Hoff for opposition forwards, but maybe this frees up Hoff to do something else. Either way, the talent is probably right. Cooper Hines could be available, at our second selection. That would make sense. Again, a very contest inside focused midfielder. It's not a strict need, but nonetheless, still need midfield depth, right? And then I suspect at some point we'll trade in for a tall. That's the way I see it going. I'd be surprised if it happens at our second pick, but like I said, it's so even that maybe we do take Charlie Nichols with our second selection. There's been so many drafts where we've done really well with our later picks, so I'll reserve judgment on those. Like Brady Hoff at 31, I was like, I've heard the name, I don't know anything about him. Great selection. So I'm keeping an open mind, but I do think that we'll take a tall defender, whether it be Charlie Nichols. Again, he's more of a forward, but I have read that he's pretty adept down back as well. There's Tom Bell and there's Clancy Dennis, who has been linked to Collingwood, but being Western Australian, perhaps we have a look at him. There's also Boxall, which I don't know too much about him. He's a good run and carry midfielder, I think. There's Zach Johnson. A couple of other West Australian types we could take with later picks. And it's a sort of draft where we might actually use later picks, because I think there's value in taking them. I don't think we'll pass out too early. So with that all being said, the prediction I'll say tentatively here is Taj Houghton. I'm still hoping it's Xavier Lindsay. Like, that is my plan A, or at least my primary hope. If Xavier Lindsay gets through, I just think there's so few question marks on him. He's so well performed. He's clearly a midfielder. Got a good two-way game, has the outside class and polish to help us, improve on our delivery inside 50 and, get the ball from inside to out. I think he should be our pick, but I don't think he's going to be available. So failing that, probably Taj Houghton. And I'll say my third guess could be Ollie Hannaford. Probably just wishful thinking. But geez, if I get this right, do you know how smug I'm going to be? A medium amount. But yeah, long story short, got to keep an open mind. I hope that tomorrow I wake up for the stream, which will be about 7:45 a.m, and I'll have excitement in my heart. And I do think that maybe there's a chance we take 2 picks. Like, is there a chance we take 2 picks tomorrow? I think there's a chance. It'll be tough, though, because I think there's a lot of clubs clamoring for, say, Richmond's picks or anything like that. They also have the first pick at day 2. I do think we'll end the draft with an extra pick. I just have no idea where. And if we take 2 first rounders and one of them Shanahan, I'll live with that as well. Like, 1 pick on its own and taking a key position player seems a bit wrong, to be honest. But, if we had 2, then I won't complain, because I do think he's got top-end quality, and we need top-end quality. Anyway, I hope this made sense. This was a bit of a ramble just about my thoughts and feelings ahead of the draft. And like I said, you can catch all my thoughts in real time. And then immediately after the draft, I'll do my thoughts on every club, including West Coast. And then at some point, I'll do my best to get back around to True Eagle. Like, there's a chance I do a video in between day 1 and day 2, but I think I'm going to be pushed for time. But anyway, let me know in the comments, what are your final predictions? Let me know yours. So I said Houghton and... I didn't really lock one in for the second pick, did I? Shit. I'll say some sort of combo of Houghton, Hamish Davis, and Charlie Nichols plus Malachi. Oh, even just saying that just sounds wrong. I just don't think it's going to be right. So anyway, that'll do for now, guys. Hope this video made sense. I'll catch you very shortly on either of my 2 channels, but let me know in the comments what you're thinking and feeling today, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.